Hey everyone, welcome back to LGBT Stories. Today, we're diving into a powerful and emotional tale that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about love, family, and attraction. This story isn't just about two brothers. It's about the complexity of human emotion and the courage it takes to confront your deepest desires. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and prepare to be moved by a story that will stay with you long after the credits roll. Are you ready? Let's dive in. The kitchen had always been the place where my brother and I often found common ground despite the many differences between us. He was the epitome of all-American, straight-laced, athletic, and charming. He was the kind of guy who made people gravitate toward him. Meanwhile, I'd always been the quieter one, the observer, the one who didn't quite fit the mold. Growing up, our relationship was close, even if it was marked by the kind of teasing and roughhousing typical of brothers. He'd pick on me for being too sensitive, too bookish, too quiet, and I'd roll my eyes at his brash confidence. But beneath it all, there was a bond that was unshakable. He was protective in a way that never needed to be said out loud, and I knew he'd always have my back. Lately, something had shifted. That summer, he was back home after finishing his first year of law school. Our parents had gone on a 2-week vacation to celebrate their anniversary, leaving us in charge of the house. I'd been nervous about spending so much time alone with him. Not because we didn't get along, but because I'd started noticing things about him that I hadn't before. Subtle things like the way his shirt clung to his shoulders, or the way his laugh seemed to echo in my chest. It was confusing, unsettling, but I did my best to push those thoughts aside. It was a humid Friday evening when it all began. I was chopping vegetables for dinner, the rhythmic sound of the knife against the cutting board grounding me. He was leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone and occasionally glancing up at me. The radio played softly in the background, a mix of old rock and pop hits. "You've gotten good at that," he said, nodding toward the diced onions. I smirked, not looking up. "Thanks. It's not exactly rocket science." He chuckled, setting his phone down. "Still, I'd probably lose a finger if I tried." I laughed at the memory. "Yeah, Mom grounded you for a week. You deserved it." He stepped closer, reaching for a piece of carrot from the cutting board. "Not that. That was your fault for distracting me." "Oh sure, blame me for your inability to use a stove." I shot back, rolling my eyes. Our playful banter felt natural, easy, but there was something different about it that night. His teasing seemed less brotherly, more intentional. The way he stood close to me, the way his eyes lingered on mine a second too long. It was subtle, but I noticed. As I moved to the stove to stir the pot of soup, he followed, leaning against the counter beside me. His presence was magnetic, pulling my focus away from everything else in the room. I could feel his gaze on me, and my hands faltered for a moment as I tried to keep my attention on the task at hand. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice softer now. I glanced at him, caught off guard by the sudden shift in his tone. "I've just been busy, I guess." "Busy doing what?" he pressed, his eyes searching mine. I hesitated, unsure how to answer. How could I explain the whirlwind of emotions I'd been grappling with? The way my feelings toward him had started to shift into unfamiliar territory. Instead, I shrugged. "Just stuff." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he reached for the spoon I was holding, his hand brushing against mine as he took it. The contact was brief, but sent a jolt through me, a warmth that lingered even as he stirred the soup. "You're distracted," he said, a teasing edge returning to his voice. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "Nothing," I said quickly, stepping back to put some distance between us. He turned to face me, a small smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You're a terrible liar, you know." "I'm not lying," I insisted, though the slight quiver in my voice betrayed me. He stepped closer, closing the gap I'd just created. "Okay, then prove it." I frowned, confused. "Prove what?" "Prove you're not lying," he said, his voice low, his gaze locked on mine. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to think of a response. The playful atmosphere between us had shifted again, and I wasn't sure how to navigate it. He was standing so close now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. His presence was overwhelming in a way that left me both nervous and exhilarated. Before I could say anything, he reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from my forehead. His touch was gentle, deliberate, and it sent a shiver down my spine. My breath caught as his hand lingered for just a moment too long before dropping back to his side. "See," he said softly, his smirk fading into something more serious. "You're definitely hiding something." I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. The air between us felt thick, charged with an energy I couldn't ignore. His eyes held mine unblinking, and I could see something in them that mirrored the confusion and longing swirling within me. The silence between us stretched, thick with an unspoken tension. I tried to focus on the bubbling soup on the stove, but it was impossible. He was still standing too close, too close. His presence was overwhelming in the small space. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, an effort to ground myself as my thoughts spiraled. "Seriously, what's up with you?" he asked, breaking the silence. His voice was softer now, his teasing edge replaced with genuine concern. "You've been weird lately." "I'm not weird," I muttered, avoiding his gaze. "You are," he insisted, stepping even closer. "You're quiet, distracted." "It's not like you." I swallowed hard, my mind racing for a way to deflect. "Maybe I'm just tired." "Tired?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You've been tired for weeks. Come on, don't give me that." He leaned against the counter beside me, his arms crossing over his chest. The movement pulled his shirt taut against his broad shoulders, and I quickly looked away, heat creeping up my neck. "You can talk to me, you know," he said after a moment, his tone gentler now. "Whatever's going on, I'm here." The sincerity in his voice made my chest tighten. He had always been good at cutting through the noise, at getting straight to the heart of things. But this, how could I possibly explain this to him? How could I put into words the mess of emotions I was feeling? The way my heart raced whenever he was near, the way my mind wandered to places it shouldn't. "I'm fine," I said finally, forcing a small smile. "Really?" He studied me for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as if he didn't quite believe me. But then he sighed, pushing off the counter and reaching for the ladle and the pot of soup. "Fine," he said, his tone lightening. "If you won't talk, I'll just have to distract you." "Distract me?" I asked, frowning. Before I could react, he dipped the ladle into the soup and flicked a small splash of broth in my direction. I yelped, jumping back as the hot liquid landed on my arm. "Owen," I scolded, but he was already laughing, his grin wide and mischievous. "Relax, it's just a little soup," he said, his laughter contagious. "You're such a child," I muttered, grabbing a dish towel to wipe my arm. "Maybe," he said, his grin softening into something warmer. "But at least I got you to smile." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped me. Owen had always had a way of breaking through my walls, of making me forget whatever was weighing me down. It was one of the things I both loved and hated about him. We fell into a comfortable rhythm after that, the earlier tension easing as we worked together to finish dinner. Owen set the table while I ladled the soup into bowls, and soon we were sitting across from each other, the soft hum of the radio filling the silence as we ate. I found myself stealing glances at him, my heart twisting with every small smile and laugh. He was so easy to be around, so effortlessly charming, and it was infuriating how much I noticed it now. I'd always admired him, always looked up to him in a way that felt natural for a younger brother, but this was something else entirely. "So," he said, breaking me out of my thoughts, "what's the plan for the rest of the night?" I shrugged, stirring my soup absent-mindedly. "I don't know. Probably just watch a movie or something." "Sounds good," he said, leaning back in his chair. "But you're picking. Last time I let you choose, we ended up watching that artsy indie thing about a guy and his goat." I laughed, shaking my head. "It was critically acclaimed. Thank you very much." "Critically boring," he shot back, grinning. "You just don't appreciate good storytelling," I teased. "Maybe not," he admitted, his smile softening. "But I appreciate spending time with you." The words caught me off guard, my breath hitching in my throat. There was a sincerity in his voice that made my heart ache, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. "Same," I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Owen's eyes met mine across the table, and something passed between us. Something unspoken, but deeply felt. It was a connection that had always been there, but felt different now, heavier somehow. After dinner, we moved to the living room, settling onto the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us. Owen handed me the remote, and I flipped through the options, trying to focus on the screen, but my mind kept drifting. My thoughts were tangled in the closeness between us. Owen stretched out beside me, his arm resting casually along the back of the couch. His presence was overwhelming, his warmth seeping into the small space between us. I could feel his gaze on me, even as I intended to be engrossed in the movie. "You okay?" he asked after a while, his voice low. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "You sure?" he pressed, leaning in slightly. The movement brought him closer, his shoulder brushing against mine. My heart raced, my breath catching as I turned to face him. His eyes were searching mine, filled with a mix of concern and something else, something I couldn't quite name. "I'm fine," I said again, though the words felt hollow. Owen didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further, instead settling back into the couch. His arms still brushed against mine, the movie playing on, but I barely registered it. My thoughts were too focused on the man sitting beside me. The movie droned on in the background, a dull hum compared to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through my head. Owen hadn't moved from his spot on the couch. His arms still rested along the back, brushing against my shoulder. The proximity was maddening. Every tiny shift he made sent a ripple of awareness through me. I tried to focus on the screen, but it was impossible. My mind kept looping back to him, his scent, the casual way he leaned back, the way his fingers drummed lightly against the fabric of the couch. It was all too much and not enough at the same time. Owen's voice broke through my thoughts, pulling me back to reality. "Are you even watching?" I blinked, glancing at the screen. Some generic action sequence was playing, but I had no idea what was going on. Yeah, I lied, clearing my throat. "It's good." Owen chuckled, the sound low and warm. "You're a terrible liar, you know." I could see in his eyes he was onto something. I flushed, grateful for the dim light of the room to hide the heat creeping up my neck. "I'm just tired," I mumbled, hoping he'd let it go. But, of course, Owen never let anything go. "You've been saying that a lot lately," he said, shifting to face me. "What's really going on?" His eyes were on me again, piercing and intent. I hated how easily he could see through me, how effortlessly he peeled back the layers I tried to hide behind. "Nothing," I said finally, hoping the vague answer would satisfy him. "You know, work? Life, all of it." Owen didn't look convinced, but he didn't push further. Instead, he shifted closer, his arm brushing fully against mine now. The contact sent a jolt through me, and I struggled to keep my breathing steady. "You know I'm here, right?" he said quietly. "For whatever you need." "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know." We sat in silence for a while after that, the movie forgotten. I could feel his presence beside me, solid and grounding yet utterly overwhelming. My thoughts swirled, a tangled mess of emotions I couldn't name. I fought the urge to pull away, but couldn't bring myself to move closer either. Owen shifted again, his knee brushing against mine this time. The small movement sent my heart racing, and I clenched my hands in a fist to keep from reaching out. It was ridiculous the way my body reacted to him, like I was a live wire, sparking with every small touch. "You've been different lately," Owen said suddenly, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Like I don't know, distant." "I haven't," I said quickly, too quickly. "You have," he insisted, turning to face me fully now. "And I can't help but feel like it's because of me." His words hit like a punch to the gut. I opened my mouth to deny it, to reassure him that he wasn't the problem, but nothing came out because deep down, I knew he wasn't entirely wrong. "It's not you," I said finally, my voice tight. "It's complicated." Then uncomplicated, he said simply, like it was the easiest thing in the world. "Talk to me." I stared at him, at the way his brow furrowed in concern, the way his lips pressed into a thin line as he waited for me to speak. He was so open, so unguarded, and it made my chest ache. "I can't," I said, shaking my head. "You wouldn't understand." Try me, he said, his voice soft but firm. The room felt too small, the air too heavy. My heart pounded in my chest, and I could feel the heat of his gaze on me, waiting, patient but insistent. I wanted to tell him to lay it all out and hope he wouldn't hate me for it, but the words stuck in my throat, too tangled and messy to make sense of. Owen, I started, but he cut me off. Hey, he said, his hand landing gently on my knee. The touch was grounding, yet it sent a shock wave through me, my skin buzzing where his fingers rested. It's okay, he said quietly. You don't have to say anything if you're not ready. I nodded, swallowing hard. His hand stayed on my knee, warm and steady, and I couldn't bring myself to pull away. The tension between us crackled, the air thick with something unspoken, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, one step away from free falling. You're not alone, he said quietly, his eyes locked on mine. Whatever's going on, you've got me. I'm your brother. The words were simple, but they hit with the force of tidal wave. My throat tightened, and I had to look away, afraid of what he might see in my expression. I couldn't do this. Not now, not like this. I know, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. Thanks. Owen didn't move his hand. Still on my knee, his gaze still heavy on me. The silence stretched between us, thick and charged, and I felt like I was about to unravel. And then, as if sensing my breaking point, Owen pulled away. The loss of his touch was immediate and jarring, and I hated how much I missed it. He leaned back against the couch, his arms crossed over his chest, and let out a soft sigh. Whenever you're ready, he said, his voice low. I'm here. Even though I felt the tension had calmed down a bit now, I knew this wasn't over. Oh no, this was only the beginning. I could never have imagined what was still to come. The next morning, the sunlight filtering through the curtains felt too bright, too intrusive. I blinked against it, trying to shake off the weight of the restless night. My mind was still spinning from the conversation with Owen, or rather, the almost conversation. He'd given me space, but his words, "Whenever you're ready, I'm here," echoed in my head. I shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The smell of coffee greeted me, and there was Owen standing by the counter, shirtless and casual as ever, like he didn't hold the power to completely unnerve me. His broad shoulders caught the morning light, and I had to force myself to look away before my thoughts spiraled further. "Morning," he said, glancing up from his phone with a small smile. "Coffee's fresh." "Thanks," I muttered, grabbing a mug and pouring myself a cup. My hands felt unsteady, but I tried to hide it, focusing on the steam rising from the coffee. The silence between us wasn't tense exactly, but it was heavy, charged. I could feel his eyes on me as I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee and willing myself to act normal, whatever that meant anymore. "You seem more out of it than usual," Owen said, setting his phone down and crossing his arms. "What's going on?" "I'm fine," I said quickly, too quickly. He raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Sure," he said, stepping closer. "Because you've been acting different." I hated how easily he saw through me, how effortlessly he could pick apart my carefully constructed walls. "I'm just tired," I said, avoiding his gaze. "That's all." Owen didn't respond right away, and I risked a glance at him. His expression was unreadable, but there was a hint of something in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or something else. "Look," he said, finally stepping closer. "If you ever want to talk, you know I'm here, right?" "Yeah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know." The closeness was suffocating in the best and worst way. I could feel the heat radiating from him, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. My heart raced, and I clenched my mug tighter, hoping he couldn't see how much he affected me. "Good," he said, his voice soft. "Because I mean it. You're my brother. I care about you." The words hit harder than they should have. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and turned my attention back to my coffee. But I could still feel his presence, heavy and overwhelming, like he was standing right on the edge of my thoughts. "You sure you're okay?" he asked again, his voice quieter this time. "I'm fine," I repeated, though it was a blatant lie. Really, Owen didn't look convinced, but he didn't press further. Instead, He moved to the stove, grabbing a pan and some eggs. "You hungry?" he asked, his tone casual now. "Not really," I said, though my stomach betrayed me with a low rumble. Owen smirked, cracking an egg into the pan. That's a lie if I've ever heard one. I rolled my eyes, but a small smile tugged at my lips despite myself. It was easier somehow to fall back into our usual rhythm, to pretend, even for a moment, that everything was normal. He started cooking, humming softly under his breath, and I found myself watching him out of the corner of my eye. There was something so effortless about the way he moved, so comfortable in his own skin. It was infuriating in a way. How he could be so calm and collected while I felt like I was barely holding it together. "Here," he said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs toward me. "Eat. You'll feel better." I hesitated, but the smell was too tempting to resist. "Thanks," I muttered, digging in. Owen sat across from me, his own plate in hand. The quiet between us felt different now. Not as heavy, but still charged. I could feel his eyes on me as I ate, and it took everything in me not to meet his gaze. "You've got something on your face," he said after a moment, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Where?" I asked, wiping at my mouth. "Here," he said, leaning forward before I could react. He reached out, his thumb brushing lightly against the corner of my lips. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through me, and I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. "Got it," he said, pulling back and licking his thumb. "Thanks," I mumbled, my voice barely audible. The moment passed quickly, but the tension lingered thick and undeniable. I focused on my plate, trying to ignore the way my pulse raced, the way my skin tingled where he touched me. Owen leaned back in his chair, watching me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "You're really bad at hiding things, you know that?" he said, his tone light, but his words pointed. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, forcing a casual shrug. "Sure you don't," he said, smirking. "You've always been a terrible liar." I wanted to argue, to brush him off, but the way he looked at me, like he could see straight through me, left me feeling exposed, vulnerable, and I hated it. "Maybe you just think too much," I shot back, trying to deflect. "Maybe," he said, his smirk softening into a smile. "But I'm usually right." The words hung between us, heavy with implication. I glanced at him, and for a moment, our eyes locked. There was something in his gaze, something I couldn't name, but it made my breath catch. "I need to get ready for work," I said abruptly, pushing back from the table and grabbing my plate. The tension was too much, and I needed to escape before I said or did something I couldn't take back. Owen didn't stop me, but I could feel his eyes on me as I left the kitchen, and even as I closed the door to my room, the weight of his gaze lingered, pressing against me like a shadow I couldn't shake. The rest of the day passed in a blur, work offering a welcome distraction, but Owen lingered in the back of my mind like a shadow. His words, his touch, the way he looked at me. It all felt too close, too overwhelming. I couldn't escape the memory of him brushing his thumb against my lips or the quiet intensity of his gaze over breakfast. When I got home that evening, the apartment was quiet. The sun was setting, casting warm golden light through the windows, and for a moment, I thought I was alone. But as I stepped into the kitchen, I found Owen there, leaning against the counter with a glass of water in his hand. His shirt was damp with sweat, clinging to his chest in a way that made it hard to look away. He must have just finished a workout. "Hey," he said, his voice casual, but his eyes sharper than usual. "How was work?" "Fine," I said, setting my bag down and trying to sound normal. "Same as always." Owen nodded, taking a sip from his glass. The silence between us felt heavy again, and I busied myself by opening the fridge, even though I wasn't hungry. The cool air was a welcome distraction from the heat that seemed to radiate off him. "Did you think about what I said this morning?" he asked suddenly. I froze, my hand resting on the fridge door. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean," he said, setting his glass down on the counter. "I can tell something's been bothering you, and I'm not going to stop asking until you tell me." I shut the fridge, closing my eyes for a moment to gather myself before turning to face him. "It's nothing," I said, but the lies sounded weak, even to my own ears. Owen stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You keep saying that, but I don't believe you. Why does it matter?" I snapped, the frustration bubbling to the surface before I could stop it. "Why do you care so much? What do you want from me?" "Because I'm your brother," he said, his voice steady but tinged with something deeper. "I can't stand seeing you like this, like you're carrying something you can't talk about." "You wouldn't understand," I muttered, looking away, unable to meet his gaze. "Try me," he said, taking another step closer. I could feel the heat of him now, the closeness making it hard to breathe. My chest felt tight, my thoughts racing as I tried to figure out how to deflect, how to make him back off without giving too much away. But Owen wasn't backing down. He reached out, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder, and the warmth of his touch sent a jolt through me. "Whatever it is," he said softly, "you can tell me." I wanted to, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I shook my head, stepping back and putting distance between us. "I can't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Owen's jaw tightened, but he didn't push further. He just stood there, watching me with an intensity that made my heart race. "Okay," he said after a long moment, "but I'm here when you're ready." His words felt like a lifeline, and I nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks." Owen hesitated like he wanted to say more, but then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm going to shower. We'll talk later." "Yeah," I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it. He left the kitchen, and I let out a shaky breath, my hands gripping the counter for support. The tension between us was suffocating, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending everything was fine because it wasn't fine, not even close. Later that night, I found myself back in the kitchen, staring out the window at the city lights. The air felt heavy, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I didn't hear Owen come in until he was standing behind me, his presence unmistakable. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Something like that," I said, not turning around. I couldn't face him. Not yet. Owen stepped closer, his footsteps soft against the tiled floor. "You've been quiet all day," he said, quieter than usual. "I told you I'm fine," I said, but the words fell hollow. He didn't respond right away, and I felt him move closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the heat of him at my back. "You're lying," he said quietly. I closed my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. "Why do you keep pushing this?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Why can't you just let it go?" "Because I know you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I know when something's wrong." I turned then, unable to take the weight of his words. His eyes met mine, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming, and I could feel my resolve crumbling under the pressure. "Owen," I started, but I didn't know how to finish. The words caught in my throat, tangled and messy, and I looked away, unable to hold his gaze any longer. His hand found mine, his touch warm and grounding. "Whatever it is," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you don't have to go through it alone." His eyes told me he was onto something, and it excited me. The sincerity in his voice broke something in me, and before I could stop myself, the words came tumbling out. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I don't know what to do." Owen's grip on my hand tightened, and he stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to figure it out right now," he said. "We'll figure it out together, no matter what. But I think I know how I can help you," he continued with a certain look in his eyes, while closing the distance between us. His words were a balm to the chaos in my mind, and the touches he started to make were with a certainty I couldn't deny. I nodded, a shaky breath escaping me. "Thanks," I said, my voice barely audible. What was he going to do? Owen smiled a soft, genuine smile that made my chest ache. Anytime, he said while moving down, this was crazy. We hadn't even kissed yet, and he was going to do this to me. I had never imagined he would be down for this. I had imagined it already a couple of times, but I thought he wasn't interested at all. When he actually started, I let out a small breath. This was amazing. Where'd he learn this? And when I finished, I could see in his eyes this wasn't over. "Owen," I said, "thank you. Thank you so much." He grabbed my hand and stayed silent. The moment hung between us, heavy and fragile, and I could feel the unspoken words lingering in the air. But for now, this was enough. For now, the warmth of his hand in mine was enough. The next morning, the air between us felt lighter, though the unspoken tension from the night before still lingered in the shadows. Owen was in the kitchen making coffee, his movements calm and steady as if nothing had changed, but I knew better. Something had shifted, even if neither of us was ready to name it yet. "Morning," I said, stepping into the kitchen. "Morning," he replied, glancing over his shoulder with a small smile. "Coffee's ready if you want some." "Thanks," I said, grabbing a mug and pouring myself a cup. The familiar ritual felt grounding, a small piece of normalcy in a world that suddenly felt unsteady. Owen leaned against the counter, his eyes on me as I took a sip. "You doing okay?" he asked, his tone casual but his gaze sharp. I nodded, setting the mug down. "Yeah, I think so." He didn't push further, just nodded and took a sip of his own coffee. The silence between us was comfortable, but there was an undercurrent of something deeper, something neither of us was. He hesitated, his fingers drumming lightly against the counter. "How about we hang out, just the two of us, like we used to?" I looked at him, surprised. "You mean like brother stuff?" He chuckled, shaking his head. "Yeah, brother stuff. What else would I mean?" The warmth in his voice eased some of the tension in my chest, and I found myself smiling. "Okay, that sounds good." The day passed in a blur of shared memories and easy laughter. We went to our favorite diner for lunch, wandered through the park, and even played a few rounds of an old video game we hadn't touched in years. For a little while, it felt like nothing had changed, like we were just two brothers enjoying each other's company. But beneath the surface, I could feel the weight of the unspoken words between us, waiting for the right moment to surface. That moment came later that evening, back in the kitchen where it had all started. I was cleaning up after dinner when Owen came in, his expression thoughtful. He leaned against the counter, watching me as I scrubbed a plate. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice quiet. "Sure," I said, glancing at him. "What are you so afraid of?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. The question caught me off guard, and I set the plate down, drying my hands on a towel. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Last night you said you were scared." "Scared of what?" I swallowed hard, the words sticking in my throat. "I don't know," I said finally. "Everything, I guess. Feeling things I shouldn't, wanting things I don't understand." Owen stepped closer, his expression softening. "You're allowed to feel things, you know, even if they don't make sense right away." "It's not that simple," I said, shaking my head. "Try me," he said, his voice steady. I looked at him, the weight of his gaze pulling the truth from me. "I'm scared of losing you," I admitted. "Of ruining this, whatever this is." Owen's expression softened even further, and he reached out, his hand resting lightly on my arm. "You're not going to lose me," he said, his voice firm. "Nothing could ruin this, not if we're honest with each other." The sincerity in his voice made my chest ache, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "I don't know how to do this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "But maybe we can figure it out together." The simplicity of his words eased something inside me, and I nodded, a shaky breath escaping me. "Okay." Owen's hand tightened slightly on my arm, and for a moment, we just stood there. The silence between us was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Then, without thinking, I leaned into him, resting my forehead against his shoulder. He didn't pull away. Instead, his arms came around me, holding me close. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. "You're not alone in this," he said softly. "Whatever you're feeling, whatever you're going through, I'm here." His words were a lifeline, and I held on to them, letting the warmth of his presence wash over me. The world outside felt far away, unimportant compared to this moment. That night, as we sat together on the couch, the air between us felt different, lighter, like we'd finally crossed a bridge that had been looming for too long. Owen leaned back, his arm draped casually over the back of the couch, and I found myself leaning into him without hesitation. "I don't know what happens next," I said quietly, my eyes fixed on the TV. "Neither do I," he said, his voice soft, "but we'll figure it out, one step at a time." His words were simple, but they held a weight that grounded me. And as I sat there, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, I realized that maybe that was enough for now. It was enough. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more heartfelt, emotional, and sometimes heart-wrenching tales right here on LGBT Stories. Don't forget to leave a comment below and share your thoughts. What did you think of the story? And if you're new here, welcome. We're all about celebrating diverse love stories and creating a safe space for everyone. See you in the next video.